Hello everybody, it is Obscure Nick back here today with a new video, and today we are going to be discussing the ending of a television channel and the ending of a kids television channel, Nickelodeon. So let's deep dive and thrive. So if you're not familiar with Nickelodeon, which I'm sure everyone that's watching right now, if you're not subscribed to this channel, you can take a hint, but for those who are first watching this channel, Nickelodeon is one of the biggest kids networks and one of the first solely American network for kids that first launched in 1979 under the name Pinwheel. It later revamped itself to Nickelodeon, the name, and throughout the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, it has produced some of mine and your favorite kids television programming, such as Rugrats, Ren and Stimpy, Clarissa Explains It All, You Can't Do That on Television, Hey Arnold, All That, iCarly, Victorious, True Jackson BP, Drake and Josh, The Amanda Show, and the list goes on and on. The golden age of Nickelodeon was definitely in the 90s, I would say, when it had its own amusement park. Do you guys remember Nickelodeon Studios in Orlando, Florida? Well, that studio opened in 1990 and then was shut down in 2005. Many kids would go over there to see their favorite taping of their favorite shows, and they would go on the rides there that Universal had. You know, it was all in good spirits because Nickelodeon in that period of time did not capitalize so much on its merchandise for its shows, but they would more so get the investments from this studio itself, because they didn't want the merchandise of those shows to be put in the world necessarily, because Geraldine Laybourne did not want to stress kids with, kids buying stuff. They already have enough stress already. We don't need the money to be, she was a smart woman to not overwhelm kids and to keep kids away from the capitalism aspect of producing these shows, of these shows in general, and keeping those shows as the shows themselves, because that's where the heart lies within the shows, I find. Honestly, I feel Nickelodeon would be a lot different now if she was in charge throughout much of the time I grew up as well. And I feel it would have been a different network, and kids television would be entirely different, and just the marketing of it in general would be different. I feel Nickelodeon has lost that message, and it's more about money, 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 and throwing merchandised items in kids' faces versus it being just about the show itself existing in television. Where we see a lot of that in the 2000s, the late 90s and 2000s with SpongeBob, iCarly, Victorious, Big Time Rush, those types of things. And yeah, it's become a whole different way kids television has been perceived and how it's been brought out in various ways. SpongeBob alone, just that brand alone, with its merchandise, brought in Nickelodeon $13 billion, which is insane. And I think because of that, just generally, that's why it became more capitalistic, and why this is actually, I understand that businesses, when they need to improve, they get bigger, they need to work more based on a financial basis, like pushing that agenda even further in some way. But with a kids network, I feel they need to figure a way to go about it without putting kids, you need to buy my money, you need to buy my merch, rather than having the show inviting you in. The whole money aspect and marketing became even bigger during the late 2000s and early 2010s with iCarly, Victorious, Big Time Rush, and eventually, because of that though, it became the biggest cable network in the country. However, in 2012, when they canceled a unanimous amount of shows, such as iCarly, Victorious, Big Time Rush, How to Rock, Bucket and Skinner's, The Troop, Super Ninjas, Marvin, and much more, that's when the network began sinking and the ratings began, slipping down. Because in 2009, the iCarly episodes had, 10 million 9 million, 5 million. Around those, that was just for the kids shows themselves. That's the numbers they were ranking in, so they brought in a lot of money. That's why iCarly stayed on for quite a long time. iCarly ended, they needed to find a new route. All the shows around 2009, 2010, if you notice, the schedule begins to change and shift, where it's only shows that DS created, apparently. It seems like the network only had confidence in his work and no one else's work, just judging off of that, because it would be like one of these new shows, let's just say like How to Rock would premiere, and they would only promote it for 1 or 2 episodes, and then it's like, okay, we gave you a chance, you didn't get iCarly victorious ratings, so we're pulling you off. And that's how it felt like with a majority of shows from that era, simply, and that's why the variety lacked. The variety was there, and the Nickelodeon greenlit it, but they never promoted it enough, and they only favored certain people's shows over others, which I get that DS had the marketing, the money marketing of kids buying certain products from these shows down, and that's probably a factor that played into it, along with several other things, which that's for a different video. But I do think those other shows could have had potential to expand as well. For instance, True Jackson VP was a show about fashion. I heard rumors, and I don't know if it came true, but True Jackson was gonna have, that show was gonna have a fashion line of its own for young girls. Kind of like Zoe 101 did in the mid-2000s with Licenza. They had a whole deal there, and I think that was gonna happen with True Jackson VP. And they could have done that. How to Rock could have also benefited from soundtracks and tours. They could have figured ways around it. However, I do like the idea of Geraldine Laybourne's message of not overwhelming kids with all the marketing and the money and all that stuff, and just giving them the heart of the show. And I think that's the essence of what was missing from a lot of shows in this period. And that's why Nickelodeon began to decline more and more, because people saw right through it. And I think the iCarly Victorious era was truly an overwhelming era, in my opinion, because we also had Hannah Montana, and we just had all these like people trying to be artists and sell their work because they found music to be a pretty easy marketing tool to use. And so that's what they did, and they followed the templates of the Disney Channel and everything and put it in the Nickelodeon. I think as well, depending on one creator was killing them, because the ship sank even further from 2013 to 2018, because it was all DS programming on the schedule. And here's the thing, ratings got lower and lower. Like Henry Danger premiered in like the 1 million range, whereas Victorious was 5 million. I think Big Time Rush had a pretty big premiere rating as well. True Jackson, I think, premiered with 4 million or 3 million. So compare that, and then Henry Danger. And then I think Game Shakers even premiered lower than that. Like, did that even premiere at 1 million? Like, I know that the ratings just began sinking, and at that point they were just depending on reruns of DS's old shows and his new shows. And that's what the schedule became, and SpongeBob. Those were the two things that Nickelodeon was at that time. In March 2019, DS was let go from the network due to suspicious behavior. That was all alleged, of course. A year later, one of DS's closest friends, Brian Robbins, became the president of Nickelodeon, which Brian Robbins used to work on a lot of DS's shows, like All That. And they started Head of the Class together in the 80s. It seems like in this Brian Robbins era, he's trying to keep DS's legacy alive because DS's shows are still on the schedule. Henry Danger marathons, every Henry Danger ever marathons are happening all the time still. And then also greenlighting reboots of All That and iCarly. And it's like, what other original programming is there now? Like, can someone inform me? Because I don't see a lot of that, other than like DS's legacy and SpongeBob. I get that Brian Robbins is trying to move over to the streaming with Paramount Plus, because we are in a different era, and I understand why television channels are dying, and that's a big part of the conversation, in my opinion, because Netflix has changed the game for everything because people can watch instantly. The era of watching TV waiting for your scheduled shows to come on is no longer a thing. It's all instant. You get to cherry pick what you want and when you want to watch it. So if a show's working or not, the clicks will prove it, actually. And I feel that as well, they need to promote these stuff though. And that's always been a struggle with Nickelodeon, just at least in the past decade or so, or even a little over a decade, I would say. Because I grew up watching, I don't watch Nickelodeon now at all, but so I am out of the loop on a lot of that stuff. But when I grew up, I lived in an era where before social media even, I had to wait till my show came on, but because I had to wait because of my show came on, I had the privilege of, even if there were other shows I wasn't interested in or I didn't really care for, I could still find elements of those shows to like, just to get through it, to get to my favorite show, you know? Sad that kids no longer have that, and kids will never know that. I feel that's just a part of time that I grew up with that today's kids would never understand. So another hint at why I think Nickelodeon will shut down sooner rather than later is because at Nick and More, a great site to find all news on Nickelodeon, they actually keep me up to date 90% of the time on what's going on with the network now. And what they tweeted out pretty much was about the sister network, Teen Nick, which Teen Nick was it's kind of like a throwback channel, I guess, of just older programming. And it consists of mainly DS's shows just in the past 10 years. And it has the Nick Rewind block, which is the throwback block, which was the 90s or all that, the Splat, Nick Splat. It went through a whole evolution of stuff, and it started out as a 90s block rerunning show that was supposed to have a variety of programming, but it became just Nicktoons and DS's shows. That's all it became, even though Nickelodeon has a really great back catalog of shows that are truly kid shows, in my opinion, and that go back in the 90s and that I think have timeless messages that still resonate with kids today, truthfully. Despite the era they were made in, their messages stay timeless, and that's what was so great about those shows. And it's quite sad that Nickelodeon doesn't take a chance on those and try to promote those more to the kids of today. Nick and More, they said that Teen Nick is doing every Henry Danger Ever marathons and iCarly marathons, and that's all it is on the schedule, literally, and SpongeBob. Those are the three things. And then, so DS's shows reran to no end, which I don't know how people could stick around for this. No wonder why you're going down. If people will get bored of watching the same thing over and over again. I'm just gonna say that. Having a marathon of the show, which you probably could rerun in a week, the full series, kids are going to get sick of that. They also cut down the Nick Rewind block from, I think it was from 12 to 6 a.m. to now only 3 hours. And they used to have even more Nicktoons, but now the only Nicktoon that's on there is Rugrats. And apparently they were going to do a bunch of Christmas stuff, but that's no longer a thing because all of next week it's just Rugrats and that's it. That's really it. The channel doesn't have to die that fast either. I'm not saying that it's gonna be saved because, truthfully, I'm not here to say, let's go save Nickelodeon. I'm just saying that kids' networks need to just stop being so one-dimensional, and it's quite crazy to think about it. When you look at the schedule from 1991, you see Clarissa, Ren and Stimpy, Rugrats, Wild and Crazy Kids, Flipper, Lassie, 15, Welcome Freshmen, all Salute Your Shorts, Adventures of Pete and Pete, all in one day. You could see all the variety of shows in one day. And now it's only 3 or 4 shows on the schedule, and it's the same ones every day. And it's Jesus, like, I got a lot of my creativity and ideas and imagination. I was like a doodler and stuff, so I would always try to doodle and come up with my own creations because I was so inspired by the shows I grew up with. For me in Canada would be Nickelodeon, would be YTV, Cartoon Network would be Teletoon, and we'll have conversations about Teletoon going forward, by the way. And so a lot of the shows I grew up with were so creative and so imaginary and so eccentric and enthusiastic, and it's like, does Paramount Plus have anything new for kids, like, other than rebooting DS's shows, which in my opinion, rebooting something isn't something new. Like, it isn't something, like, we've seen it before, it's just nostalgia for people of the past. You know, DS isn't the only person on this network that could create a good show. Like, truthfully, because there was Thomas W. Lynch, who did The Secret World of Alex Mack, Journey of Alan Strange, 100 Deeds of Eddie McDowd, Caitlin's Way, Romeo, Bucket and Skinner. He did various amounts of work here, and he deserves credit too. Like, some of those shows I listed off, especially Alex Mack and Alan Strange, those are classic 90s shows to the network that shaped the network for what it was. I know David Israel, he's a really sweet guy, and he really does care about the storylines of his shows, and he did How to Rock, and I adore that man. I've spoken with him before, and he's not a problematic creator either. There's Andy Gordon, who did True Jackson BP, so, you know, there are other people's legacies here to check out, and I think that made the network great for what it was, because this was not based off of one person, okay? Like, I think there are so many great creators who are not problematic that deserve some spotlight on them, and I think deserve the respect for the creations that they did. Another reason why I think Nickelodeon will shut down soon, along with a lot of television channels, is because it's already happening. It's already happening in the world, because Disney Channel and other countries have been shutting down this year, I believe, and I think next year. And there's an article for that you guys should really check out. And I do think this will happen to Nickelodeon in the US. I think it'll start internationally and then come to the US. And just judging off of the recent ratings, because they can't even do 500,000 now. Like, they're barely reaching 500,000 at this point. Whereas 10 years ago, they were going like 9 million on some of those iCarly episodes. So I truthfully think kids networks need to think about the future for kids, and they need to bring new things and variety and find the heart of the show and find out what kids are into, but also take some of the universal messages from your past shows that still resonate today and place them in these shows. And I know it's possible. And there are some decent kids shows that have been made in recent years that I've taken a glimpse of, and I'm like, okay, that's pretty decent. Now, Brian Robbins, Gen Z is in your hands. Take it as you may. I want to thank you guys for watching this video today. I know it was a bit of a long one, but thank you for tuning in, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.